A cowboy bought the neighbor's ranch. What he found locked below changed everything. John McAllister had spent most of his life under the wide, open skies of West Texas, where the wind seemed to carry stories of generations past, and the sun painted the land in shades of gold and amber. From the moment he could walk, John had been drawn to horses, cattle, and the rhythm of ranch life. His father had taught him to ride before he even knew how to read a map, and the smell of leather, hay, and morning dew was as familiar to him as the sound of his own heartbeat. Life on a ranch was not easy. It was long days, early mornings, and hard work. But it was honest work, and John loved every minute of it. For years, John had rented a small parcel of land on the outskirts of his hometown, tending to a few cows and maintaining a modest home. It was enough to get by, but he dreamed of something bigger, something that would give him space to breathe, room to expand his herd, and a place he could truly call his own. Every night after the sun had dipped below the horizon and the sky was sprinkled with stars, he would sit on his porch with a cup of coffee, imagining a wider stretch of land, open pastures, and the freedom that came with ownership. The opportunity arrived one crisp autumn morning. As John read the newspaper over breakfast, a small ad in the classifieds caught his attention. Silver Creek Ranch for sale. Prime land, excellent water sources, established fences. Serious inquiries only. He recognized the name immediately. Silver Creek Ranch was the sprawling property next door, once owned by the enigmatic Harper family. The ranch had been abandoned for years, ever since old Mr. Harper had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. The land had grown quiet, the fences weathered and sagging, and the barns creaking in the wind, as if the entire property were holding its breath, waiting for someone to give it life again. John's heart raced as he studied the listing. This was exactly what he had been dreaming of, yet a shiver of uncertainty ran down his spine. The townsfolk had long whispered about Silver Creek Ranch. Some said Mr. Harper had been a kind but secretive man who preferred his own company to anyone else's. Others spoke of strange sounds at night, of lights flickering in the old barn when the wind blew just right. John had always shrugged off the rumors as small-town stories meant to entertain gossiping neighbors. Still, the thought of owning that ranch, with its untamed past and hidden potential, was impossible to resist. Within days, John contacted the real estate agent and arranged a visit. Driving down the long, dusty road that led to Silver Creek Ranch, he felt a mix of excitement and nerves. The land stretched farther than he had imagined, dotted with rolling hills, a patchwork of green pastures, and a slow, winding creek that reflected the clear blue sky. The main house, though worn by time, still held a certain charm, with its wooden porch sagging slightly and its windows coated in a fine layer of dust. It was the kind of place that felt alive with stories, and John could almost hear echoes of the past in the soft creaks of the floorboards. As he walked through the house and outbuildings, John noticed the care with which some things had been preserved. Tools were neatly hung in the shed. A few pieces of furniture remained in the living room, and the barn, though quiet, still stood strong against the years of wind and sun. He imagined the Harper family going about their daily lives, the rhythm of chores and meals, the laughter of children chasing each other across the yard. The thought made the land feel less empty, as if the past were waiting to meet him in some small, subtle way. After the visit, John returned home, unable to stop thinking about the ranch. He went over his finances carefully, calculating every possibility. Buying Silver Creek Ranch would be a risk. It would require time, effort, and money that he could barely afford. But he felt a pull he could not ignore, a sense that this land was meant for him, as though the ranch itself had been waiting for someone who would appreciate it, care for it, and breathe new life into it. A week later, John found himself signing the papers, the weight of the pen in his hand matching the gravity of the decision he had made. As the documents were finalized, a wave of both relief and anticipation washed over him. He was now the owner of Silver Creek Ranch. The property, with its quiet barns and weathered fences, was officially his. It was not just land. It was an opportunity to start anew, to create a home, and to honor a way of life that had shaped him from childhood. John spent the first few days walking the land from sunrise to sunset. He inspected the fences, checked the water pumps, and mapped out the pastures. Every corner of the ranch had its own character. The creek, for example, twisted and turned in unexpected ways, creating little pockets where wildflowers grew abundantly. A grove of oak trees near the eastern edge of the property offered shade for the cattle in the hottest part of the day. Even the barns had personality. The main barn was sturdy and solid, while a smaller, older barn seemed almost fragile, as if it had been holding its breath for decades. Despite the work ahead, John felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had dreamed of this for so long that finally being here felt surreal. Each evening, he would sit on the porch of the main house, watching the sky change colors and the sun sink behind the hills. The wind carried the faint smell of hay and earth, and the distant sound of cattle lowing in the pasture was like a melody he had known all his life. The ranch was no longer just a dream, it was his reality. Yet there was something else, subtle but persistent, that he could not ignore. Small details hinted that the ranch held more than just land and livestock. A section of the barn floor seemed unusually solid. Certain doors in the house were locked and untouched, as though someone had left them that way for a reason. Occasionally, John would catch a glimpse of old furniture or equipment that looked intentionally arranged, almost waiting for him to notice. He pushed these thoughts aside for the time being, telling himself that old properties always had quirks. Still, a part of him felt a quiet pull, an instinct that there was more to Silver Creek Ranch than met the eye. Neighbors came by to welcome him. Some were curious, some cautious, and a few even shared small bits of history about the Harper family and the ranch's past. Old Mr. Jenkins, who had lived in the town for nearly 80 years, spoke in hushed tones about the days when Silver Creek Ranch was thriving. "Harper was a private man," he said, shaking his head. "Good man, but private. Never let anyone close, not even family sometimes. That ranch, it holds its secrets." John listened politely, noting the caution in Mr. Jenkins's voice, but feeling a growing excitement beneath it. He wanted to discover the stories, the history, and yes, even the secrets if there were any. By the end of the first week, John had started to settle into a routine. Mornings were spent checking fences and tending to the cattle. Afternoons were for repairs and planning. Evenings, he would sit on the porch, sometimes writing notes or sketching maps of the property, imagining what life here could look like in the months and years to come. The ranch was already changing him, making him more patient, more observant, and more in tune with the rhythms of the land. It was as if each tree, creek, and hill had a story to tell, and John was ready to listen. One night, as he prepared to turn in, a sudden thought struck him. The ranch had been abandoned for years, and yet it felt alive in a way he couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was the wind whispering through the trees, or the way the old floorboards creaked under his boots, but there was an undeniable presence here. Not threatening, not frightening, just aware. It made him feel that Silver Creek Ranch was more than just property. It was history, it was memory, and perhaps it was waiting for him to uncover what had been left behind. John went to bed that night with a sense of wonder and anticipation. He had taken the first step toward a dream, and though he knew the journey ahead would be full of work, challenges, and surprises, he felt ready. The land was his now, the past intertwined with the present, and he could feel that something remarkable was waiting just beneath the surface. Little did he know, his curiosity would soon lead him to a discovery that would change everything he thought he knew about Silver Creek Ranch, the Harper family, and even himself. After a week of settling into Silver Creek Ranch, John McAllister began to explore every corner of the property more thoroughly. The land was vast, stretching farther than the eye could see, with rolling hills, quiet pastures, and groves of trees that had stood for decades. John had already mapped out the fields, checked the water sources, and walked the fences, but there was one part of the ranch that still held his curiosity: the old barn. The barn was large and sturdy, though the paint had long faded and the wood groaned under its own weight. It stood near the center of the property, facing the rising sun in the morning and catching its golden light through the cracks in the walls. John had inspected it quickly before, but something about it called to him. It was not just the structure itself, but the sense that it had been built with care and purpose, and that it held secrets within its walls. One afternoon, he decided to spend the entire day in the barn, cleaning, organizing, and making minor repairs. As he swept the floor, he noticed a section near the back that felt slightly different. The boards were thicker, and there was a faint outline of a square, almost like a door that had been covered up. John knelt down and pressed his hands against the wood. It was solid, but something about it gave him the impression that it could be opened. Curiosity got the better of him. He fetched his hammer and crowbar and began prying at the edges. The work was slow, and dust rose in small clouds with every strike. John's arms ached, and the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the barn floor. But he persisted, driven by a feeling he could not explain. Finally, with a final push, the boards gave way, revealing a small trapdoor hidden beneath years of dust and neglect. His heart raced. John paused for a moment, staring at the dark opening. He could not see what lay beneath, but he could feel the cool, musty air rising from the gap. It smelled of earth, old wood, and something else he could not identify. He grabbed a flashlight from his bag, took a deep breath, and lifted the trapdoor fully. A narrow set of wooden stairs descended into darkness. John's mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps it was just a root cellar used to store vegetables or preserves. Or maybe it was an old storage area for tools and equipment. Yet, something in the careful way the boards had been nailed down, and the fact that it had remained untouched for so many years, told him it was more than that. It was a secret, waiting for someone to discover it. He carefully stepped down the stairs, the wood creaking under his weight. The flashlight beam revealed a small, dimly lit cellar, just large enough for a person to move around. The walls were lined with shelves, and along the floor were wooden crates and old trunks, stacked neatly as if someone had taken great care in arranging them before leaving. Dust covered everything, but despite the age, nothing appeared to have been moved. John moved closer to the shelves, examining the contents. Most of the crates were filled with farming tools, ropes, and other equipment that seemed ordinary at first glance. But in the corner of the room, he noticed something different, a stack of journals tied with faded ribbons and a few leather-bound books. He picked one up carefully, brushing off the dust. The cover was worn, but the writing inside was clear. It was a diary filled with neat, precise handwriting. As John began reading, he realized he was holding a piece of history. The diary belonged to the previous owner of the ranch, Mr. Harper, a man whom the town had known little about. The entries began years ago, documenting daily life on the ranch, the challenges of raising cattle, and the struggles of living in a remote area. John could picture the man writing by candlelight in the evenings, describing the weather, the crops, and the livestock. But as he read further, the entries took a more personal turn. Mr. Harper wrote about his family, his relationships with neighbors, and the small joys and disappointments of life on the ranch. There were mentions of secret projects, plans for the property, and letters exchanged with people outside the town. John realized that this cellar was not just a storage space. It was a carefully preserved record of a man's life, kept hidden from the world. The excitement built as he discovered more. Some of the crates contained old photographs, yellowed with age. John picked up one carefully. It showed a young Mr. Harper standing proudly in front of the barn with his family and several ranch hands. The faces were stern and serious, but the pride in their eyes was evident. Another photograph showed a group of people gathered by the creek, children playing and adults tending to horses. Each image told a story, and John felt as though he had stepped back in time. Among the papers, he found letters tied in bundles with ribbons. Many were addressed to people he did not recognize, but some were to townsfolk, discussing matters of business, property boundaries, and personal favors. John carefully opened one. It revealed a conversation about land ownership disputes and family disagreements, hinting at conflicts that had shaped the town decades ago. He realized that Mr. Harper had been involved in more than just ranching. He had been a silent witness to the town's history, keeping records of events that many had forgotten. Hours passed as John sifted through the journals, photographs, and letters. Each discovery deepened his sense of connection to the ranch and to the man who had once owned it. The cellar hidden beneath the barn was not just a storage space. It was a time capsule, preserving the life, thoughts, and experiences of someone who had dedicated himself to the land. John felt honored to have found it, but also aware of the responsibility that came with the knowledge. As evening approached, John sat on the wooden floor of the cellar, surrounded by the crates and journals. The sun had set outside, and the barn was bathed in shadows. The quiet of the room was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of the old structure settling. He thought about the town, the neighbors, and the stories that had been lost over the years. This discovery could change how people saw the history of Silver Creek Ranch and even the town itself. Yet, he also felt a twinge of caution. Some of the letters hinted at disputes, secrets, and mistakes that had caused pain, revealing everything could upset people even now. John understood that history was delicate. Some stories were meant to be remembered, others to be respected quietly. He decided that he would take his time, reading carefully, learning what he could, and considering the right way to honor the past. Over the next few days, John returned to the cellar regularly. Each visit brought new discoveries. A trunk hidden behind a stack of crates contained old deeds, certificates, and ledgers detailing land ownership, livestock sales, and financial transactions. Another crate held personal items, a pocket watch, a pair of worn gloves, and a small box of keepsakes. These objects, simple as they were, made the past feel tangible, as though Mr. Harper had just stepped out for a moment and would return at any time. One day, John came across a set of letters that made him pause. They spoke of a feud between families, long buried and largely forgotten. The letters described disagreements over land boundaries, inheritance, and old promises broken. Reading them, John felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He realized that the ranch had been at the center of these disputes, and that the hidden cellar had preserved evidence of events that had shaped the community for decades. Despite the gravity of the discovery, John felt a growing sense of purpose. The ranch was no longer just land. It was a keeper of stories, a witness to human struggles, and a place where history could be remembered. He imagined sharing these stories with the town, honoring those who had lived and worked there, and perhaps even bringing closure to conflicts long past. The thought filled him with both excitement and responsibility. At night, after long days in the cellar, John would sit on the porch of the main house, thinking about what he had found. The ranch felt alive in a new way. It was not just soil and grass, but memory, legacy, and connection. The discovery had changed how he saw the property and even how he saw himself. He was no longer just a rancher looking for land. He was a guardian of history, a link between the past and the present. One afternoon, while carefully cataloging the journals and letters, John noticed something odd about the floor near the back of the cellar. A small section seemed different from the rest, almost like it had been reinforced for a purpose. His curiosity piqued once again. He began to examine it closely. Beneath layers of dust and dirt, he uncovered another small compartment, hidden even from the first glance. Inside were several boxes, locked but surprisingly well preserved. John felt his pulse quicken. Whatever lay inside this hidden compartment was meant to stay secret, and yet it had waited for him to find it. As he sat in the cellar, surrounded by the echoes of the past, John understood that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. The ranch had given him land, opportunity, and freedom, but now it had given him a mystery, a story that was waiting to be uncovered, and a connection to the man who had lived here decades ago. John knew that whatever he found next could change everything, not just for him, but for the entire town that had grown around Silver Creek Ranch. John McAllister had spent weeks exploring Silver Creek Ranch, mapping its past as carefully as he had its fences and fields. The barn cellar had become a place of fascination for him, a hidden world filled with dusty journals, photographs, and letters. Yet, the small, locked compartment he had discovered at the back of the cellar called to him more than anything else. It had been hidden so carefully that it suggested someone had wanted the contents to remain secret forever. John felt a mix of excitement and caution. Whatever lay inside, it was part of the ranch's history, and perhaps part of the history of the town itself. He returned to the cellar early one morning, sunlight spilling through the cracks in the barn walls. He carried a small toolkit, determined to carefully open the compartment without damaging anything inside. Dust rose in soft clouds as he worked, his hands steady but his heart racing. After what felt like hours, the lock finally gave way. The box creaked open to reveal its contents: stacks of papers, old envelopes tied with ribbons, and a small chest that was surprisingly heavy. John carefully examined the first papers. They were ledgers and legal documents, deeds, contracts, and agreements that went back decades. Some of them detailed land sales that no one in town had ever heard of. Others contained information about family inheritances, showing that property had passed through hands in ways that had been kept secret. John realized that the Harper family had not only owned Silver Creek Ranch, but also a hidden network of land that extended far beyond what anyone remembered. The chest at the bottom of the compartment intrigued him most. It was locked with an old-fashioned clasp, but it opened easily with a small twist. Inside, John found something he could hardly believe. Bundles of gold coins, certificates for bank deposits long forgotten, and letters written in careful, flowing handwriting. He set the chest aside for a moment and opened one of the letters. It revealed a secret he had never imagined. The letter was addressed to a distant relative of the Harpers, someone who had been quietly removed from the family's public records. The writer described a plan to protect the family's wealth and legacy from outside threats, ensuring that the property remained in the hands of those who truly understood the land. There were references to disagreements, threats, and betrayals, explaining why some members of the family had disappeared from public life or been kept away from the ranch. John realized that the previous owner, Mr. Harper, had not simply abandoned the ranch. He had been protecting a legacy, keeping it safe for someone who might one day claim it. The gold coins themselves were beautiful, polished, and stamped with dates from decades past. They were worth a small fortune, but John felt no desire to keep them. Instead, he thought about the families mentioned in the letters, the heirs who had been forgotten by history. Whoever they were, they had a right to this wealth. He also considered the possibility that the gold and deeds were more than just money. They were a connection to the past, a way to restore what had been lost. As John continued reading, he discovered another layer to the story. Some of the letters spoke of disputes between families in the town, rivalries that had caused pain and division for years. There were accounts of land disputes, arguments over water rights, and disagreements that had escalated into long-standing feuds. The Harper family had been involved in many of these conflicts, sometimes as victims, sometimes as mediators. The letters revealed the full extent of these struggles, offering a perspective that no one else in town had ever seen. John felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, he was thrilled by the discovery. On the other, he felt the weight of responsibility. This was not just history, it was living memory. People in the town were still connected to these events, even if they did not realize it. Some families had been affected by the disputes, and secrets that had been buried for decades could change the way people understood their own histories. John knew that he had to approach this carefully, with respect and honesty. The photographs he found in the chest added another layer of depth. They were not just images of the Harper family, some depicted scenes from the town, capturing everyday life, celebrations, and moments of hardship. In one photo, a group of men stood proudly in front of a barn, shaking hands over a land agreement. In another, children played by the creek, unaware of the tensions that swirled around them. John realized that the ranch had been at the heart of the community in ways people had forgotten. It had been a place of work, friendship, conflict, and resolution, a microcosm of life itself. One envelope contained a particularly revealing letter, written in the final years of Mr. Harper's life. It described a personal struggle that no one had known about, a legal battle over the ranch, family betrayals, and threats from outsiders who wanted to take control of the land. The letter expressed fear, determination, and a deep love for the property. Mr. Harper had been alone, protecting the ranch and its secrets with every ounce of his energy. John felt a wave of respect and empathy for the man. It was as if he could hear Mr. Harper's voice, whispering through the years, guiding him to uncover the truth. As John pieced together the story, he began to understand the significance of what he had found. The hidden compartment was not just a treasure chest, it was a record of courage, foresight, and care. Mr. Harper had carefully documented every important detail, anticipating that one day someone trustworthy might find it. John realized that he had been chosen, in a sense, to continue the legacy. It was a responsibility he did not take lightly. Over the next few days, John carefully cataloged everything. He made notes, photographs, and copies of the most important documents. He wanted to ensure that the information was preserved, even if he had to hand it over to the rightful heirs or authorities. The process was slow and meticulous, but John felt a growing sense of purpose. He was no longer just a rancher tending to land. He was a guardian of history, a link between the past and the present. One afternoon, while examining a bundle of letters, John discovered something that made him pause. It was a message from Mr. Harper to someone in town, written in code. The letter described a hidden location on the ranch, a place where important items had been kept safe from prying eyes. John's heart raced as he read the instructions carefully. The letter suggested that there was more to the ranch than the cellar, more secrets hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be found. John spent hours searching the barn and surrounding areas, following the clues in the coded letter. His curiosity was relentless, and he refused to give up. Finally, in a small, forgotten corner of the property, he discovered another hidden door, cleverly disguised to blend with the natural landscape. It was reinforced and sturdy, clearly designed to keep people out. But John felt no fear, only determination. He was ready to uncover whatever had been kept hidden all these years. When he opened the hidden door, he found a small vault built into the hillside. Inside were more documents, personal belongings, and additional gold coins. There were detailed maps of the surrounding area, showing land ownership, water sources, and routes that no longer existed. John realized that this was a master record, a comprehensive account of the Harper family's holdings and plans. It was astonishing to think that all of this had remained hidden for so long, untouched by time and by people. As he explored the vault, John felt a deep connection to the past. The Harper family had trusted him in a way to honor their legacy. Every item he touched, every document he read, was a reminder of the hard work, care, and intelligence that had gone into building and protecting the ranch. John knew that the discovery was not just about wealth or property. It was about understanding the people who had come before him and ensuring that their stories were remembered. By the time he emerged from the vault, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. John looked out over the ranch, feeling a sense of awe and responsibility. He had uncovered treasures, secrets, and stories that no one in town had known existed. The ranch was no longer just a place to raise cattle. It was a living testament to the past, a connection between generations, and a source of lessons for the future. John realized that his life had changed. He had come to Silver Creek Ranch seeking land, freedom, and opportunity, but he had found something far greater: a story, a history, and a responsibility to honor the people who had built this place. The discovery in the cellar and the vault had transformed his understanding of the ranch and of himself. He was no longer just a cowboy. He was a custodian of the past, ready to carry the legacy forward with care, respect, and courage. As night fell over Silver Creek Ranch, John sat on the porch of the main house, reflecting on what he had discovered. The stars shone brightly above, and the ranch was quiet except for the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. He knew that the next steps would be delicate, deciding how to return the gold and deeds to the rightful heirs, how to share the story of the Harper family with the town, and how to ensure that the secrets he had uncovered would be honored. Yet, despite the challenges ahead, John felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. He had found more than hidden treasures. He had found meaning, connection, and a way to make a lasting impact on the ranch and the community. The discoveries had changed everything, not just about the ranch, but about the life he wanted to lead, the values he held, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. John knew that Silver Creek Ranch would never be the same, and neither would he. The land, the past, and the hidden stories had intertwined with his own life, creating a journey of discovery, responsibility, and transformation. And as he watched the night settle over the ranch, he felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the secrets he had uncovered were not just history. They were a guide for the future. John McAllister sat on the porch of the main house, the night air cool and calm around him. The discoveries in the barn cellar and hidden vault weighed heavily on his mind. He had uncovered secrets, treasures, and family histories that no one in town had known for decades. It was exhilarating, but it also carried a responsibility he could not ignore. The Harper family's legacy was no longer just a story in dusty journals. It was real, tangible, and in his hands. How he handled it would affect lives, both past and present. The first step, he decided, was to understand the rightful owners of the treasures and documents he had found. Some letters had mentioned distant relatives, while others spoke of townsfolk whose families had been forgotten or displaced over time. John began reaching out carefully, tracing the names and addresses mentioned in the journals and letters. He wanted to verify each person's connection to the Harper family or to the property before revealing anything. It was slow work, requiring patience, attention to detail, and careful research. After several days of correspondence, John began receiving replies. Some were from people who had long suspected that they had been denied a rightful inheritance. Others were from families who had no idea that they were connected to the Harpers or to Silver Creek Ranch. Each message carried a mix of surprise, gratitude, and curiosity. John felt a sense of purpose rising within him. He had not only discovered history, but had the chance to restore it, to reconnect people with their roots, and to honor the intentions of the man who had hidden these secrets. John arranged to meet some of the heirs in person. Families traveled from nearby towns and even farther away to visit Silver Creek Ranch. When they arrived, they were struck by the beauty of the land, the rolling hills, the winding creek, and the sturdy barns that had once been the heart of the Harper family's life. John guided them through the ranch, showing the cellar, the hidden vault, and the areas where Mr. Harper had worked and lived. The visitors were amazed and deeply moved. It was as if they had stepped back in time, reconnecting with a history that had been lost but was now found. During one visit, a woman named Clara Harper approached John with tears in her eyes. She had grown up hearing fragmented stories about her family, about disputes over property and wealth that had divided relatives for decades. Yet here in the documents, photographs, and letters John had uncovered, she saw the truth. "I never knew, I never understood why it all happened," she said softly. John explained what he had found, showing her the ledgers, letters, and photographs that traced her family's connections to the ranch. Clara embraced him, overwhelmed by a sense of closure and understanding she had long sought. With each new visitor, John felt a growing sense of responsibility to ensure fairness and transparency. The gold, deeds, and property rights could not simply be kept in his possession. They belonged to the families and heirs who had been wronged or forgotten. John coordinated with legal experts to transfer ownership and ensure that each rightful heir received what was due. It was painstaking work, but he found fulfillment in seeing the smiles, the gratitude, and the relief on the faces of those who had finally been recognized. As the weeks passed, John noticed something remarkable happening in the community. Old feuds, long dormant and fueled by misunderstandings, began to ease. Families who had avoided each other for years started to reconnect. Conversations were held over shared memories, apologies were exchanged, and a sense of reconciliation spread through the town. John realized that the Harper family's hidden legacy was not just about wealth or land. It was about restoring trust, healing old wounds, and bringing people together. In addition to reconnecting families, John decided to preserve the history of Silver Creek Ranch for the broader community. He worked with the local historical society to document the Harper family's story, the events he had uncovered, and the treasures found in the cellar and vault. Photographs were restored, letters were digitized, and journals were transcribed. The goal was to create a permanent record, accessible to everyone, ensuring that the history of the ranch and its impact on the town would never be forgotten again. John also transformed the ranch itself. The barns were repaired and strengthened, the fences replaced where necessary, and the pastures improved for cattle grazing. The creek was cleared of debris, and walking paths were created along the hills, allowing visitors to explore the property safely. John took care to maintain the charm and character of the ranch, preserving the sense of history while also making it functional for modern use. The ranch was no longer abandoned or forgotten. It had become a place of connection, learning, and community pride. Throughout the process, John reflected on the journey he had taken. When he first bought Silver Creek Ranch, he had been motivated by the dream of land and independence. He had wanted a place to call his own, a ranch where he could work, live, and find peace. But what he had discovered went far beyond his expectations. The ranch had given him a purpose, a mission, and a deep connection to history. It had transformed him as much as he had transformed it. One afternoon, as he walked along the creek, John met with some of the younger heirs. Children ran through the fields, laughing and playing, while their parents shared stories of their grandparents and great-grandparents. John realized that the ranch was now a bridge between generations. The land that had once been a source of conflict and secrecy was now a place of learning, joy, and shared history. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that the ranch would continue to inspire and educate long after he was gone. John also made a point of honoring Mr. Harper. He placed a small plaque in the main barn, recognizing the man's dedication, foresight, and care for the land. The plaque told a brief story of the ranch, the discoveries, and the legacy left behind. John felt it was important that the town remember not only the history, but also the individual who had safeguarded it so carefully. It was a quiet tribute, but one that carried deep meaning. Word of John's discoveries and the restoration of Silver Creek Ranch spread throughout the region. Visitors came not only to see the land, but also to learn about the history and the families connected to it. The ranch became a place of pilgrimage for those interested in local heritage, family stories, and the lessons of the past. John found himself giving tour, sharing stories, and answering questions. Each interaction reminded him of the importance of honesty, curiosity, and respect for history. Despite the attention, John remained humble. He never sought fame or recognition. His reward was seeing families reunited, witnessing the town heal, and knowing that he had honored the intentions of the Harper family. The gold and deeds, though valuable, were secondary to the sense of connection and understanding he had helped restore. John knew that Silver Creek Ranch had given him something far greater than wealth, a purpose, a community, and a legacy he could be proud of. As months passed, John settled into a steady routine. He still worked the ranch, tending to the cattle and maintaining the property, but now his days were also filled with meetings, research, and visits from families and historians. The ranch had become a center of life, education, and storytelling. The barns were busy, the pastures full, and the land vibrant with life. John often paused in the evening, looking out over the hills as the sun set, reflecting on how far he and the ranch had come. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, John walked through the barn cellar one last time. He looked at the hidden compartment, the journals, and the vault, feeling a sense of completion. The secrets had been uncovered, the heirs recognized, and the history preserved. Yet the cellar remained a reminder of the past, a quiet space where the lives of those who had come before could be remembered. John felt grateful for the trust placed in him by history itself, and he vowed to continue honoring it for as long as he lived. The transformation of Silver Creek Ranch was not just physical, it was emotional, historical, and social. The land that had once been silent and abandoned now buzzed with life, stories, and connections. Families who had long been separated by misunderstandings were reunited, the community had found new unity, and the lessons of the past had been preserved for future generations. John had turned a dream of land and freedom into something far more meaningful, a living legacy. In the quiet moments, John often thought about the journey that had brought him here. He had come seeking land, and he had found history, mystery, and purpose. He had uncovered secrets, healed old wounds, and built a bridge between the past and the present. The ranch had given him more than he had ever imagined, and he knew that the work he had done would continue to impact lives long after he was gone. As night fell over Silver Creek Ranch, John sat on the porch, the stars twinkling above, the land calm and peaceful. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had honored the past, helped families reclaim their heritage, and transformed the ranch into a place of connection, learning, and hope. Silver Creek Ranch was no longer just property. It was a symbol of integrity, perseverance, and the power of uncovering the truth. And John McAllister, the cowboy who had bought the land seeking freedom, had found something far greater: purpose, legacy, and a story worth passing down.